I built everything I have with my own two hands, and for a long time I thought that was enough. I grew up in a small town in Ohio where my father worked double shifts at a machine shop, and my mother clipped coupons on Sunday mornings like it was a second job. We weren't poor exactly, but we were close enough to poor that I knew the difference between wanting something and being able to have it. That difference became my engine. By 43, I was running a mid-sized logistics company in Charlotte with 62 employees, a house in Myers Park with a backyard my kids used to run circles in, and a marriage I believed in the way you believe in something you've worked hard to keep. My wife and I had been together for 16 years, married for 12 of them. I want to be clear about that, because what I'm about to tell you only makes sense if you understand that this wasn't a casual relationship. We built a life together. We argued about paint colors and Thanksgiving destinations, and whether our younger son needed a tutor. We sat in hospital waiting rooms for each other's parents. She held my hand when my father died, and I flew home early from a conference in Denver when her mother had her first stroke. 16 years. That's not nothing. That's supposed to be something. The first thing I noticed was the phone. She'd always been relaxed about her phone. Left it on the kitchen counter, face up, took calls in the living room. Nothing secretive about it. And sometime around late February, she started carrying it with her everywhere, into the bathroom. To bed. She started angling the screen away when I walked past. I told myself it was nothing. She was probably dealing with something at work, some drama she didn't want to bring home. She managed events for a mid-sized hotel group downtown, and that world had a lot of moving parts. I let it go. Then came March. She started staying late. Not every night, but twice a week, sometimes 3 times. She'd text around 5 saying she'd be home by 9, and she was always home by 9. Which somehow made it harder to question. She wasn't slipping, she was just away. And when she came home, she was warm enough, asked about my day, checked on the boys, but there was something performed about it, like she was hitting marks. One Thursday in the middle of March, I came home earlier than expected. Traffic had cleared. My last meeting got cut short. I pulled into the garage and sat in the car for a minute with the engine off, just listening to the silence of the house. My 2 sons were at my mother-in-law's for spring break. The house was supposed to be empty. I walked in through the kitchen door, and she was standing at the island with her back to me, on the phone, laughing at something. Not the polite laugh she used with clients, the real one. The one I used to get. She turned and saw me, and the laugh stopped like someone had cut a wire. "I'll call you back," she said into the phone, and slipped it into her pocket. "Who was that?" I asked. Casual. I was still telling myself it was nothing. "Just a vendor," she said. "New caterer we're considering." She smiled. I smiled back. I made dinner and we ate together, and I watched her across the table. And she looked exactly like my wife. Same face, same hands, same way she cut her fruit into small pieces before eating any of it. But the laugh. That laugh hadn't been for a vendor. I hired a private investigator in early April. I'm not proud of how quickly I got there, but once the thought occurred to me, I couldn't unthink it. His name was the last thing I expected to remember, but you don't forget the name of the man you pay to follow your wife. I found him through a referral from an attorney friend, someone discreet, former law enforcement. No drama. He sent me the first report 2 weeks later. I was in my office when the email came in. I sat there for 10 minutes before I opened it. I knew, in the way that you can know something before the evidence arrives, the way the body registers a truth the mind hasn't caught up to yet. I opened it anyway. Her name was in there. And his. His name was Theo Marchetti. He was a commercial real estate developer, 47, separated from his wife. They'd been meeting twice a week at a hotel near Uptown, not a cheap one. They'd been doing this, the investigator estimated based on digital patterns and observed meetings, for at least 7 months. 7 months. I sat at my desk and thought about the last 7 months. The birthdays, the dinners, the Sunday mornings. My older son's first varsity game in October, where she'd stood next to me in the bleachers and grabbed my arm when he scored. She'd been doing this for all of that. The whole time. I didn't confront her that night. I didn't confront her the next night either. I went through the motions with a kind of mechanical precision I didn't know I was capable of. Said good morning. Asked about her day. Helped with dishes. She had no idea I knew. And something about that was almost unbearable. Not because I wanted to fight, but because I'd been alone with this knowledge. And she was just standing there, right next to me, completely unaware that the floor had already given way. I called my attorney, a woman named Frances who had been handling my business contracts for 6 years and who I trusted completely. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting. Then she told me what I needed to do to protect myself financially, because my wife's name was on assets I'd built before our marriage, and the legal architecture of what came next mattered. Frances also told me something that changed the direction of everything. Theo Marchetti's wife didn't know either. Her name was Sylvie. Frances knew of her through a mutual contact. Sylvie ran a small interior design firm in the South End. 2 kids, early 40s. From what Frances understood, she had no idea her husband was involved with anyone. I sat with that for a long time. I'm not a cruel person. Whatever anger I had, and I had plenty, I didn't want to weaponize another person's pain. But I also kept thinking about Sylvie going through her days the way I'd been going through mine, sleeping next to someone who was somewhere else entirely. She deserved to know, the same way I would have wanted to know. I reached out to her through a channel that couldn't be traced back to anything official. I sent a short message, no names, just enough to let her know I was in a similar situation, that I thought we should talk before either of us made a move. I gave her a number. She called 3 days later. We met at a coffee shop in Noda, a neighborhood neither of us frequented. She arrived first. I recognized her from the investigator's background photos. Dark hair, put together, the kind of compose that takes effort. When I sat down across from her, she looked at me for a moment and said, "You know too." It wasn't a question. We talked for 2 hours. There was no theatrics, no breaking down. We were 2 people in the same wreckage, comparing notes. She had her own evidence, a credit card statement she'd found, a hotel charge she'd confronted him about, that he'd explained away. She'd half believed him. The evidence I gathered closed that door. By the end of the conversation, we had a plan. Theo was hosting a fundraising dinner the following month. It was a prominent event, a children's hospital charity gala that his development company co-sponsored every year. 250 guests. My wife had been involved in planning the catering and event logistics through her hotel group. Of course she had. They would both be there, in their professional capacities, in front of their entire professional and social network. Sylvie and I decided we would both be there too. The weeks leading up to it were the strangest in my life. I went to work. I came home. I ate dinner with my wife and listened to her talk about seating arrangements and floral vendors for an event she was helping to plan with the man she was sleeping with, and I nodded and asked follow-up questions and refilled her water glass. My boys didn't know anything. My older son was 16, smart enough to sense tension, and I worked hard not to give him anything to sense. My younger son was 12. He just needed his dad to be present. I tried. The only person I talked to was my older brother, Donnie. Not the one in my family, but a close friend. I've called that since college. He knew something was wrong by the second week of April, and he sat with me at my kitchen table one night when my wife was at a planning meeting. With Theo, I knew now, and I told him everything. He didn't say much. He just stayed. Sometimes that's the whole thing. The night of the gala arrived. I rented a car so she wouldn't see mine in the lot. I wore the navy suit she told me once was her favorite. Small cruelties are still cruelties, I know. But I wanted to look like myself, the version of myself that existed before all of this. Sylvie and I had agreed to arrive separately and meet near the bar at the far end of the ballroom. We were not there as a couple, not there as a unit. We were there as 2 people who'd been lied to, and we had agreed on one thing. We wouldn't make a scene. We would simply be present. We would let the scene make itself. I found her near the bar at 7:15. She was in a dark green dress, and she looked like someone who had made peace with what was coming. We didn't hug. We stood next to each other and watched the room. They arrived together, my wife and Theo, through the main entrance, 10 minutes apart like they planned it, which they had. I'd watched enough of the investigators' footage to know how they managed appearances. She came in first, professional, greeting the hotel staff she knew. She came in a few minutes later, handshakes with sponsors, comfortable in the room. I watched my wife scan the crowd. I watched the exact moment she found me. Her face didn't collapse. I'll give her that. She's composed. She looked at me, and then she looked at the woman standing next to me, and I watched her put it together in real time. The color went out of her face slowly, like water draining. Theo found Sylvie from across the room about 30 seconds later. I watched him too. He was less composed. Sylvie crossed the room toward him with a steadiness that I think surprised everyone who saw it. I stayed where I was. She stopped in front of him and said something I couldn't hear. but I didn't need to. The two women with him, colleagues, I assumed, stepped back instinctively. My wife came to me. She said my name. Then she said, "This isn't what it looks like." "I've been watching it for 6 weeks," I said. "I know exactly what it looks like." She looked past me, at Sylvie, at the situation taking shape across the room. "You planned this," she said. "You planned 7 months of this," I said. "I planned one evening." She didn't have an answer for that, and I didn't wait for one. The logistics of what came next were handled by Francis and by time. Divorce papers were filed 8 days later. The boys found out on a Sunday afternoon in May, sitting at the kitchen table while rain came down outside. That was the hardest hour of my life. My older son went quiet in a way that scared me. My younger one cried. I held them both and told them the one true thing I had left, that they were not losing their father, and they were not losing their home, and whatever happened between their parents had nothing to do with them. I meant it. I still mean it. What I didn't expect, what nothing in the previous months had prepared me for, was the phone call I received in mid-June, 3 weeks after filing. The call came from a woman I'll call Renata, a name I hadn't heard in 20 years. We dated briefly in our mid-20s, a few months. No hard feelings on either side. She moved out west. We'd lost touch completely. No social media connection, no Christmas cards, gone the way people used to go before the internet made it impossible to fully disappear. She said my name when I answered, and I recognized her voice immediately the way you recognize certain things. Not with logic, but with the whole body at once. "I should have called you a long time ago," she said. She had a daughter. Her name was Willa. She was 19 years old, in her first year at a university in Portland, studying environmental science. Renata had raised her alone. She hadn't told me because, this is the part I've had to sit with for months now, she hadn't been sure the relationship was going anywhere, and by the time she found out she was pregnant, we'd already ended things, and she'd convinced herself it was better for everyone if she handled it herself. I don't know how to fully describe what it was like to hear that. My hands went cold. I sat down on the back porch steps without deciding to and stared at the yard. "Why now?" I asked. "Because Willa is asking," she said. "She's been asking for 2 years. I kept putting it off. I couldn't put it off anymore. I asked for a DNA test, not because I doubted her. I didn't, not really, but because I needed something solid to stand on." Renata understood. The results came back 3 weeks later. Willa was my daughter. I've replayed the afternoon I first met her more times than I can count. It was a Saturday in August. I flew to Portland. She met me at a coffee shop near her campus. She'd chosen the location, and I respected that. She wanted control of the space. She was already there when I arrived, sitting by the window with both hands around a mug, and the first thing I noticed was that she had my mother's eyes. Not a resemblance. Exactly my mother's eyes. The color, the set of them, the way they assessed before they warmed. She was nervous. I was terrified. But she extended her hand across the table and said, with a directness that I found immediately familiar in a way I couldn't have explained, "I don't need you to be my dad. I just wanted to know who you were." That undid me more than the gala, more than the divorce papers, more than any of it. I told her the truth, that I hadn't known, that if I had known, I would have been there. I don't know if she believed me at first. I think she gave me the benefit of the doubt because her mother had asked her to, and because she is, by nature, a fair person. That fairness, I came to learn over the months that followed, was entirely her own. We had lunch that day for 3 hours. She told me about her work, watershed restoration. Something about runoff from agricultural land affecting salmon populations. And I listened the way you listen to someone you're trying to map in your head, trying to find the edges of who they are. She asked me questions too, real ones, about what I did, what I cared about, what kind of father I'd been to her brothers. That question stopped me. "You know about your brothers," I said. "Mom told me," she said. "I know I have 2 half-brothers. I'm not expecting anything. I just wanted to know." I thought about my sons, sitting in Charlotte not knowing that in a coffee shop in Portland, their sister was wrapping her hands around a mug and trying to decide how much of herself to offer a stranger who shared half her DNA. "They would want to know you," I said. And I meant it. What I did not expect, what continues to catch me off guard, was how natural it became. Not immediately, not without awkwardness, not without moments where the strangeness of the whole situation pressed down on all of us. But Willow was patient in a way that had nothing to do with me. She was patient because that was who she was. She'd had 19 years to build herself without me, and the person she'd built was someone I would have wanted to know regardless. Renata and I spoke several more times over the following months. There was no romance there. That ship had sailed 20 years ago, and neither of us was interested in retrieving it. But there was something else, a kind of mutual respect for the weight of what she carried alone, and a recognition on my part of what she'd given up by not telling me. She'd protected her life at the cost of mine. I'm not entirely at peace with that, but I understand it. I did what was right. Financially, legally, fully. I sat with my attorney and I made it retroactive in the ways it mattered. Renata didn't ask for it. That was important to me. She'd managed, but managing isn't the same as being supported, and Willa deserved to know that I wasn't the kind of man who looked for exits. My boys met their sister on Thanksgiving. I want to say it was smooth. It wasn't, not at first. My elder son was quiet for the first hour, processing. My younger one asked her 17 questions about salmon, which broke the tension so completely that Renata, who had flown in from Portland and sat cautiously at the far end of the table, actually laughed. By the time we were doing dishes, Wills and my older son were talking about college. She was giving him honest, unsentimental advice about the gap between what universities advertise and what they deliver, and he was listening in the way teenagers only listen to people they've decided are credible. I stood in the doorway and watched the three of them at the sink, and I felt something I don't have a clean word for: grief and gratitude running alongside each other. All of this could have existed years ago. It exists now instead. My wife and I finalized the divorce in January. She kept the house. I didn't want to fight over it, and my boys were still living there half the time, so it made sense. What she lost was everything she'd built with someone else's time, someone else's trust. I don't wish her harm. I don't wish her anything much at all. Indifference is harder to reach than anger. But I got there. Theo and Sylvie's divorce followed a few months later. Sylvie and I still text occasionally, not often, just enough. We have an understanding that doesn't require maintenance. She's doing well. She's selling her firm and starting something smaller, she said. I believe she'll be fine. I'm not going to tell you. I've arrived somewhere clean and resolved. That's not how this works. I still have mornings where I make coffee and sit in my kitchen, and the weight of the last year settles on my chest like something physical. 16 years. The arithmetic of it doesn't stop being what it is. But then my younger son comes downstairs in his socks and asks what's for breakfast, and my older one texts me something stupid from his room. And sometimes Willa sends me a photo from whatever riverbank she's doing fieldwork on, something blurry and enthusiastic and accompanied by 3 lines of context that I always read twice because I want to understand her work. I want to understand what she cares about. I built my life from the ground up once, in a small town in Ohio with not much to work with. I know how to build. I keep coming back to the night I sat in my car in the garage with the engine off, just listening. That moment before I walked inside and my life was still, technically, intact. I think about how close I came to staying in that car, to choosing not to know. But here's what I've learned about not knowing. It doesn't protect you. It just means you're the only one in the room who doesn't have the full picture, and you can't make good decisions for yourself, for your kids, for anyone. When you're operating on information that's been carefully managed by someone who stopped respecting you months ago, what I chose instead was clarity, and clarity costs something. It cost me the version of my life I thought I was living. It cost me the comfortable story I'd been telling myself about my marriage. But the alternative, staying in that comfortable story while it quietly rotted underneath me, would have cost me more. It would have cost me myself. There's a word people don't use much anymore because it sounds old-fashioned: integrity. Not the bumper sticker version of it. The actual thing. The condition of being whole, undivided, structurally sound. When I found out what my wife had been doing, the first thing I thought about wasn't revenge. It was, what kind of man do I want to be when this is over? What do I want my sons to have watched their father do? That question held me together through the months when almost nothing else did. I didn't go to that gala to humiliate anyone. I went because 2 people in that room had built entire second lives on the assumption that their partners weren't paying attention. They'd bet on our passivity. I just declined to be passive. Sylvie made the same choice. She could have looked away from the credit card statement. She'd half believed his explanation. It would have been easier to keep half believing it. But she didn't. And that decision, small, quiet, made alone at a kitchen table somewhere, took more courage than anything that happened in that ballroom. And then there was Willa, 19 years old, sitting across from a stranger who turned out to be her father, saying, "I don't need you to be my dad. I just wanted to know who you were." That kind of self-possession doesn't come from nowhere. Renata raised her alone for 19 years, working through every complication that comes with that. And she raised someone with a spine and a clear head and the ability to extend grace without surrendering herself in the process. You don't get that without doing the quiet, unglamorous work every single day for nearly 2 decades. The hardest thing I've done in the past year wasn't standing in that ballroom watching my wife's face go pale. It was sitting at a kitchen table in May and telling my sons the truth about why their family was changing. There's no script for that. You just have to be honest and steady and willing to hold the weight of their pain without making them hold yours. I think that's what it comes down to. When you strip everything else away, not strategy, not revenge, just who are you when the stakes are real? Do you have the honesty to face what's true, the intelligence to act on it without making it worse, and the endurance to keep showing up for the people who actually need you, even when you're running on almost nothing? I built my life from the ground up once. I know what it takes. I'm not afraid of the work.